Welcome to Total Education with Neil. In the last couple episodes, we've really covered, I guess, themes based on the time of year. Beginning of the school year, summer's ending, certain types of services that we would like help with, interesting guests. Well, I came up with a topic today, and then I know my co-host Jarrett is excited. He knows the topic, but he says, what are we doing today, right?
I'm on pins and needles just waiting to see what direction we're going to go in.
You're in pins and needles, but see, that's the fun thing. Radio every day, I talk, and you can go to my website, totaltutor.net. You can listen to me on totaltutor.net or locally 88.3 FM on Fridays at 4:30, and then on Saturdays, 1080 WWNL at 3 o'clock. But internationally, everywhere, totaltutor.net is the way. Again, a shout out to our good friends at European Health Television for covering the show now as well. And he couldn't wait to get a new show. But we really didn't have the opportunity to hit September because of how crazy things are with the beginning of the school year. Well, I think things are getting crazier and crazier. Wouldn't you agree about what is happening now with, I guess, our whole existence in society? We're talking about lots of things in education that are 2014 is going to be a very interesting year.
Well, I mean, certainly 2013 is shaping up to be an interesting last part of the year. We're going to need to see, maybe take a wait-and-see approach to what will happen for 2014. But you're right, there is a significant, I do agree with you. You asked me if I agree, and I do. There is a significant question out there that needs to be answered in what is currently happening with the government shutdown within the educational system.
Exactly, and that is going to be our topic. And I have my research on my cell phone because, again, in radio, I could just be reading right then and no one sees me. So don't mind me on these things, but I have them pretty memorized based on talking points. But before I get to this, I think that the frustration I'm going to call on the mainstream media is everyone brings up certain things that are happening with the government shutdown, but education's not mentioned right now. And there are a lot of people hurting in education that work for the U.S. Department of Education, which we'll talk about in the beginning topic. But I think that people understand with the government shutdown, even though they say certain things are covered, there's a lot of people hurting right now because of it.
Right, and we really don't see that happening. We don't see it. It isn't in the news, and I think because so many of us know that school districts are funded, the public school districts are funded mainly through resources and tax base, and that they kind of take care of themselves. But there is a significant portion of up to 20% in some school districts that receive money through federal grants, federal loans. I mean, there's a lot of money out there that is not going to be going to the schools, not now, but a little bit later down the line, unless the government shutdown is settled, and then that money will be reimbursed. But we may not see that happen now. I'm going to jump in here and even continue a little bit more. Here's where we'll see a direct impact in November, and that is that so many school districts receive government money, federal money, for their breakfast, their lunch, to supply the meal programs for lower income, underprivileged children. That's going to impact, not in October, because again, the term is forward funded. So much of our programs are funded for an entire year
which we'll
through
talk
forward funding. But meal programs are not. They are funded month to month. Now, if your school district has managed that money in a way that they have a surplus, they can dip into that surplus. If they haven't been able to do that, you're going to see an impact on the breakfast programs, the lunch programs that are offered within the school district.
Which, again, that's breaking news from all the research that I was able to do. Jarrett, being our great investigator, did the same thing based on this. But I wanted to say that, again, I'm very disappointed with the education blogs. They're not talking about the government shutdown. They're not concerned about if this continues to 2014. And maybe I'll make a prediction when you know what my predictions do. The Steelers lose every game this year, and the Pirates get out of the playoff. You didn't predict that, though.
You predicted that they would win the Super Bowl. Okay.
Hey, Ryan Clark still thinks they'll make the playoffs. So he's listening like Jim Mora in certain
I
aspects.
like optimistic attitudes.
Optimistic is definitely the fact. But I'm very upset with every news outlet in education all over and the mainstream media. So I thought, let's jump on this. But that's a great thing he's talking about with the school lunch program. What are parents going to do if we do we get to the debt ceiling, it goes through, we're already going to be hit, families are going to be hit hard, the entire country is going to be hit hard through another recession if this happens, and then this is next week for our people listening and watching. But the fact is, Jarrett, what about the fact of the government lunch program? So what are you saying? So November, will kids not have lunches?
Well, the debt ceiling, that's another whole crisis issue.
Exactly,
that
and we'll end up
not
recovering on the
right,
education.
which is not necessarily associated with the government shutdown. But what we will see in programs like the meal programs that are offered throughout every school district within the entire nation, and they are funded through federal money, federal grants. Again, with so much of these programs, that the money is given out in a block sum, and then it's up to the school district to use it as they see fit. Some school districts will have a surplus, some school districts will not, and what will happen is that those children will either have less access to food, or they may have no food, no access at all. And then the answer might be, well, it will be their parents, their caregivers' responsibility to feed them. I'm sure that we have a significant number of people who might be watching and even listening throughout our various radio programs that might say, well, that's the way it was done when we grew up. Our parents fed us. But we've recognized that that doesn't happen everywhere. And in a perfect society, we wish it would happen if everything went the way it was supposed to. But we know that children go to school hungry. We can either bury our heads in the sand and we can ignore it, or we can be proactive and do something about it. Being in education, we know the value of nutrition. We know the value of having a full belly when you go to school, particularly when you're in elementary school children, a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old. Right. It's very important. Plays a critical role in educating a child. If it isn't happening at home, we need to do it at school. We may not like it, but it's just something that needs to be done. But that is something that will, the lunch programs, the breakfast programs, they will be affected within the month.
Well, think about sequestration. People said, oh, that didn't affect anything in education. And we still aren't doing this. And we might even have to look at the effects of that on one of our radio programs, because a lot of funding is being cut that they're not talking about. Public schools are hurting big time, guys. And I'm seeing it firsthand as an educational advocate, that literally they just don't have the funding anymore. Even the most wealthy districts in the country just do not have the funding anymore. So when we're talking about something as specific as a government shutdown, right now, there's not going to be many issues. I found many things that are in my research today that's going to completely was not covered by many people. We had to really search the blogs. I mean, I thought this is something when we had our TV show, our radio show, which will air on many of the syndication. You could go check it out by Googling government shutdown total tutor. You'll find it. And what we discovered through Jason was a surprise, and it's just not coming out. So that's one thing. Let's do a checklist of all the things hurt. First of all, if it goes to November, I say it's going to go to the new year. I see that there's going to be a situation that's going to happen that literally we are going to see the most historical event in time. Well, if this occurs. I know a month is okay. It's happened a month, but the bottom line was they were still working together to fund other things in the government. They're refusing to get along, which is, again, history adding into education.
Right, and and I think that we want to be cautious in our approach, where we might come off as doomsday prognosticators. Oh, I'm here going to definitely be the doomsday but not to be critical of the direction that you're taking us. I mean, you're right. These things do matter. Again, it's not recognized in I think the public doesn't see it because so much of this money has been paid forward, which is actually fairly remarkable for our government to be so forward-thinking to pay it forward when considering that they really don't have much of a vision. And here they did have a vision to pay so many of these programs forward. But
I think it's just set up based on the school year.
Well, it is, and I was trying to give them some credit.
I'm not going to give them any credit.
But what's significant here is that this money will be, whatever money is not paid now, it will be made up. You know, so the shutdown in so many aspects does not make sense. Furloughed employees are going to get their money back. School lunch programs, if it goes into November, December, they will be reimbursed for those. So the bill will be paid.
But it'll be paid late.
Right.
But the ripple effect could be huge. So let's just go
of course.
Specifically because is there unemployment for these workers being right now? And then let's talk about the first thing. The U.S. Department of Education is pretty much stopped in certain aspects. It's still around a little bit, but 94% of their workers right now are furloughed. Can you imagine if we would say to the Pittsburgh Public Schools, not counting, if everyone that runs the administration, 94% are furloughed? Imagine how, if anyone needs to find out stuff from the U.S. Department of Education, how difficult it will be with that many workers out of work.
Well, particularly with the programs that are funded through the federal government, such as, and we're always cautious on our programs to use too much teacher jargon and too many things that will maybe isolate our observers, our audience out there. But programs such as Title I, which is math readiness, reading readiness, even though it is run through the school district, it is completely funded through the federal government. My son was in Title I when he was struggling with reading, and he had a reading specialist, and it worked. He now is in second grade, and he's actually in an advanced reading level. But kindergarten, first grade, he received those resources. Those programs will not be funded. And again, we might say, well, how many people are affected? But when we're talking about children, we're not talking about adults here.
But again, that's extended out too, so that's going to be a while.
Yes, and you know, and you touched on something so critical here. Even in the affluent communities, where money is available, budgets are so tight.
Yeah.
That I mean, because people want to do a good job managing the taxpayers' money. You talk 10% reduction, 20% reduction. In any area, that's significant.
Exactly.
Something will have to go.
We're going to have to do some research on sequestration and the effects of that. I don't know if on a television show, but we'll have to find out. But when we get back, more Total Education with Neil and Jarrett. Government shutdown, central. How's it affecting education?
Well, if the lights go off here, we'll know.
We'll be back in just a moment.
The American Legion, we're a powerful force for the nation. We pledge ourselves to our veterans, our youth, a strong national defense, and Americanism. These four pillars shape our work and what we do for America. We work relentlessly within our four pillars of service, and we succeed. Go to legion.org to find out more about the American Legion's commitment of service to America.
My name is Amanda. I'm 21 years old. I have lots of friends that use tanning beds that lay out in the sun all the time, and I tell them about Jamie. Jamie was in her early 20s when she was diagnosed with melanoma, and she died right before she turned 30. People think tanning is safe. I don't think it's safe. You could die just like Jamie did.
This message is brought to you by the American Academy of Dermatology.
We're back to Total Education with Neil. Government shutdown central. And as Jarrett said, maybe the lights will turn off next, but I don't know how much government funding is done here over at Bethel Park, but we'll have to find that out, and then will that be hurt? But so far discussion is there's been some people hurting. First of all, the people that are going to be hurting, first of all, are the people in the U.S. Department of Education. They're right now not receiving checks. I understand the fact that they will be paid back, but some of them said they're already going to have to go find new jobs. So, and you know that the U.S. Department of Education, any of the types of things that we're looking for, hey, we're interested in all these things. The U.S. Department of Education, as we're going to find out in the second segment and throughout the show, they do a lot of things that you wouldn't consider education.
Well, that have some role within the educational system, but yes, and I won't give away your surprise. But when we do get to that, I think our audience will, just as our listening audience has discovered as we've been presenting these arguments, they will find that it's surprising how much the federal government is involved, the Department of Education, and a critical role they play, not just. Let's forget the whole idea of let's throw out the idea of just really setting the standards, presenting the programs. Again, school districts, especially here in the state of Pennsylvania, where school districts really have autonomy that even within a lot of states, they do not, individual school districts do not have that kind of autonomy that we see right here within our own district level. And people seem to like that. People like that they can rely on their school district to kind of set the standard. They feel like, I think they feel like they have more of a role, taxpayers, voters feel like they have more of a role within the district and that they see things as tangible. But so many of those ideas are coming from the top. And if those aren't there, we will feel the impact. And again, this is what we stated. So many of these districts, you have districts who are relying on federal money to just run, districts who have been taken over by the state.
Correct.
That money is some of that money is coming from the federal government that is given to the state. What are those school districts going to do? So, and we talked about, you take away 3%, 1% of this. If you come into my home and you take 20% of my income away, our budget away, we'd have a significant lifestyle change.
That's a great point. And then this is where this is a message from the U.S. Department of Education, ed.gov. Thank you for visiting ed.gov. Due to the lack of appropriations, ed activities have been curtailed, and most employees are on furlough. ed.gov will not be updating during the shutdown. Updates will resume, and the ed will return to normal operations as soon as funding is restored. Well, I think that's going to hurt people that go to ed.gov and want to find information, go to ed.gov and want to do certain things. So the surprise is that there's a lot of situations of what's going on. So I wanted to kind of go into some of the things hurt by the U.S. Department of Education being closed, but what were you going to say?
Let's touch on this just before this. And the question that I think that so many people are asking or should be asking is, why isn't this out in the media, in the newspapers? Why aren't we reading so much about this? And again, we know this answer. We've been in education. We have been therapists. We tend to overlook our most vulnerable people, and children really are our most vulnerable of all the people that we have. They can't vote. They don't produce an income. They're not much of an influence on a politician except for maybe at election time and getting a good photo op. But I think that's the reason that we're seeing this is just not being raised within the public sector. And I think that if somewhere we can put pressure on the politicians, to the congressmen, the senators, to recognize what is happening. We know this as therapists, and we've talked about this on so many of our shows. Milestones matter, and milestones within 2 months, 3 months, they're important milestones. And if we even lag behind by a few months, it can have maybe not a lifelong effect, but it can certainly have an effect. Imagine if my son would have not had access to Title I programs when he was in kindergarten and first grade. Would he be where he is now? He might be. Maybe my wife and I would have picked up the slack. But I don't know if that would have happened. And I would not like to find out, quite honestly.
Exactly. So here are the things that are going to be hurt right now. Here are 5 effects of the shutdown within the realm of college services and higher education. Because, again, we didn't
they
think
can
about
vote.
colleges.
That might matter.
Yes. 1, The U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights has stopped its current investigations of universities suspected of mishandling sexual violence cases on their campuses, which is the violation. The Huffington Post reported this includes ongoing cases such as the ones in the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and the University of Virginia. This is something that I think these investigations being stopped, this could hurt the victims big time before we have funding. This is something that's a normal, everyday situation that goes on to investigate these universities. Imagine this happening with Sandusky.
Well, I wasn't sure we wanted to go there.
I'm going there. This is not 1080 WWL.
Right. I wasn't sure we wanted to go in that direction.
But I'm willing to.
While driving through and riding the subway, which was one of my favorite things to do out here, I see a significant number of Penn State stickers on cars as I'm coming through. So
hail the Penn.
I wasn't sure that we wanted to take it in that direction. But you're right. It doesn't mean that universities can't do it. It doesn't mean that they don't even want to do it. But sometimes there's institutional controls that are not followed that require the federal government to have their investigations. And you mentioned two circumstances there. And again, our audience might be saying, well, two out of how many? That there's so many universities and there's so many state universities. But that establishes a policy. Let's go back to Little Rock, and the civil rights movement. That was the federal government that was involved there in establishing that control. That was one instance, but it set policy for generations that saw incredible change immediately. But most importantly, you're right. Neil, if we forget the victims here, then we have let money come at the cost of a single person. And that's something that I don't think any of us can really accept or should accept, because that single person matters, whether that person is one vote or doesn't vote. It matters to that person. And you're right, how does that person go on knowing that the investigation, if the university itself has failed, if the community within that university has failed them, they're counting on the someone to take that cause. And it's something that I think that we can overlook. Certainly our politicians have overlooked it because they don't seem to really see this as a priority. But yeah, it's significant.
Another one that's very surprising: military academies are disrupted. The 5 military service academies are experiencing a plethora of consequences due to the shutdown. Politico reports, and it's all only going to get worse. The U.S. Merchant Marine Academy in Kingsport, New York, was hit hardest. The academy completely shut down Tuesday and was forced to send home more than 1,000 midshipmen from the government. Various classes are canceled. The Naval Academy in Annapolis, Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, and others. Teachers at the U.S. Military Academy in West Point are expected to shoulder a heftier load to cover furloughed civilian colleagues. Academic resources have also been cut. Those at the Naval Academy can't check out books at the library. Are you kidding me?
Does anybody still do that?
While the media lab, tutor centers, and library have been closed at the Air Force Academy.
Right. And here's where we see the effects of the civilian. Again,
look how the military's getting hurt by this.
My brother's a retired lieutenant colonel, actually retired colonel. So he knows full well the way the civilian population and the military population work side by side. The employees that are being furloughed are really civilian employees. But you saw my smile, and maybe the audience saw my smile too when you mentioned the military academies, because here's where the media did not drop the ball. They instantly recognized that football games could be disrupted.
Oh, we don't.
But amazingly enough, this is typical of our military personnel. We know they're going to pick up the slack. They've done it in the history. They've done it throughout the history. So yes, those professors and those teachers that are part of the military, the cadre that are there, we know they're going to do it, and they're going to do it without being asked. They're not going to get any extra pay for it. so we know we can count on them to do that. So classes will go on. But you're right. Other programs within that system will not be funded. So library access. I made a joke of, we have a wonderful library right upstairs that I visit after the show so many times. And I know it's really utilized here in Bethel Park. But I made a joke. Boy,
he has a lot of time on his hands.
Well, I like to take my time when I'm out here.
Yeah.
But those services matter, especially at institutions that have sterling reputations for educating personnel, educating students.
And it's going to be interesting. We're going to find more of them out, what's going on, and certain ones being shut down. A story that I guess is not education related, but if you want to look at military again, Catholic masses were stopped at a certain military base. The priest was willing to do mass for free and said, I'll do confessions. They would not give him access. This is where, and that's where, again, conservatives would believe, well, that's just, no, the bottom line is if they've decided this is one of the things being cut, they can't do anything about it.
Well, here's the question that I've tried to research. Again, the students that attend these academies are scholarship students. I'm guessing that money is, the money to educate those students is federally funded through the scholarship system. I want to know what happens if that money starts to run out. Did the students get that money for the term, for the whole year? And I've been trying to find an answer to this, and I just cannot find an answer. So tuition is going to be affected at these universities, at the academies. Everyone that goes there is a scholarship student, and deservingly so, especially considering the commitment they are making after they graduate. But where is that money coming from? We know the military is still getting paid. That's funded differently. But what I have not been able to come up with, if an answer is, how are we paying for the education?
Interesting. And the research, you really have to dig through the research. And we did that last night, Jarrett and I, just saying, you know what, we wanted to provide something. Because I really assumed government shutdown after Jason gave us all this different stuff. Who knows if he was...
Which wasn't always accurate. And that's what we wanted to be.
Exactly.
We wanted to come on air and be accurate with what we were presenting.
All right, so when we get back, because maybe there are naysayers out there that want to end the government shutdown quickly by saying everything in the world is done, the shutdown. Certain lights in Bethel Park aren't working because of the government shutdown. Just kidding. You're watching Total Education with Neil. We'll be back in just a moment.
What you doing, Dad?
My favorite thing.
Really, Dad? What are you doing?
Paying bills. Every month a stack of them come, just as regular as the rain.
What's this one?
That's a special one, son. I pay it first.
How come?
It's money for my retirement account. I put some money aside each month, just like I was paying a bill.
Wouldn't you rather buy something?
I don't want to work forever, and I don't want you to have to support me in my old age. In a way, I'm buying peace of mind. I'm on the installment plan.
And now, another adventure with Savings Man.
This is great. Every day should be like this.
It will be when I retire in a few years. I've been planning and saving.
Did you save for me?
Well, this is unexpected.
Where'd you come from?
Out of the blue, just like an illness, an emergency, or
That's enough, Mr. Unexpected.
Savings Man.
There's still time to plan. Find out how at choosetosave.org with a ballpark estimate worksheet.
I will. Thanks, Savings Man.
No, thank you.
So visit choosetosave.org today.
We're back to Total Education with Neil, with Jarrett. And again, go to my website, totaltutor.net, Twitter, Total Tutor, Neil S. Haley, Facebook. And am I going to say hashtag Bethel Park? And that's just for our listeners out there that watch the show as well. And our good friend across in the pond, our good friend John Hicks, a shout out to European Health Television for picking up the feed and all over the world. It's interesting to be on, and they're probably looking at us and laughing right now about all the different issues that are occurring.
Well, this is what I have heard. I do have friends, acquaintances that I'm I communicate with email that are overseas, and yes, Europe actually, from what they have shared with me, is really finding this stunning that the political parties are letting the government come to a halt, and this is being discussed about worldwide.
Oh, yeah, because they're
and
afraid
it makes sense that we have. The United States is the key player. We set the tone for the rest of the world.
Exactly. All right. So another one is research funding is stalled during this time. Deemed non-essential, all types of scientific research conducted at public universities have halted. At the University of Hawaii, scientists were forced to halt their research on vaccination of rat lungworm disease, an infection that can cause a type of meningitis in humans.
I imagine there will be mass protests now that we've shared that with our audience.
The Post reports, because of much of the research is conducted in federal buildings, university researchers no longer have access to their work. The University of Michigan, which relies on $53 million in federal research money each month, may see cuts in its research throughout all departments. This is this situation. But all the research, there's people, again, not working. There are people, again, not finding cures of certain diseases. And as I talked, we'll bring up the NIH at one point, because, again, that's education. Because of autism, I'm going to bring it up.
Not simply autism,
but other things, too.
Let's talk about.
But we'll definitely talk about that when we get to that.
So, I kind of made a joke. I made light of lungworm disease within mice and the money that is there, and how that will be the critical turning point and leading the revolution to get the government shut down by the Americans finished. But the research starts somewhere. So many months ago, I was on this show and spoke at length about my son's illness and the disease and the way we're moving forward with it. But the research that is being done right now at Ohio State University, from Dr. Welling, it's with mice. So yes, I made a joke about that, but it starts somewhere, and if that research is disrupted, a month setback could be years because of the regulations that are involved with getting a drug out into the community through the FDA. You have a month delay, you could be looking at a year's delay of getting that medication out there.
I think it's going to last. I think the government shut down.
And we're not even going towards the NIH and the National Institute of Health, and our audience might be saying, well, how is that related to education? But you touched on something. My son's disease, NF2, is researched at the NIH. Is there an educational component? Absolutely. My son is 7 years old. So much of
everything's related.
Right, you're right. When it affects a child and it affects education, nutrition, it is an educational question. It's an educational dilemma. But so much. Now let's talk about the biggest one, and in our work that we've done as therapists have touched so many families and our lives, especially as children with autism. So much research is being funded by the NIH, and that research is critical to developing better therapists, better treatment options, answers to this really challenging issue that so many families face, and we know a lot of families face. The statistics are out there now. So the NIH, the government shutdown affects the NIH, which is going to affect education, and we know this primarily with autism.
Another one coming out there is scholarly resources are not up to date. I want to get back to specifically the situation later with the NIH if we can get into more process. Many federal sources of information commonly used in research papers and academic work are not being updated during the shutdown. Drexel University's library warned its students. The websites for the U.S. Census Bureau of Labor Statistics, data.gov, fedstats.gov, and the Education Resources Information Center, ERIC, are currently not up to date among many others. And ERIC is really involved in a lot of things involving education. ERIC is like the person that we go to when it comes to teacher research.
Yeah, it's an online database that has been around for, at least 20 years, maybe even longer than that. But it's a database that teachers, educators, parents can turn to for ideas, things that can help them within educating their child and educating students.
Absolutely. So, I mean, thinking about that in a lot of ways, not having access to data means no research. That's another thing of research, does not lead to certain changes in things, because we see that certain programs aren't working. NCLB. So I wonder how much more data we can grab, and we can come up with different research techniques when it comes to education and best practices, especially with all the things if government funding keeps getting shut down and changed.
And you used the term right there, best practices. And we've talked so much about today on how can these issues be overlooked And now we see how they can be overlooked, because they may seem so small, so minor. So a parent doesn't have access to the Department of Education website. Well, maybe they can check it out next week or next month. A teacher doesn't have access to Eric. There's plenty of other resources to search for lesson plans. No, I'm simply offering an explanation for it. Well, or anyone. I think that the educational component of this. Look, we don't see Democrats arguing about education within this shutdown. We hear all the other talking points.
Exactly.
We don't hear the Conservative Party arguing about this. Everyone is overlooking this. Our own president has addressed so many areas. No, not education.
Not at all.
Yeah. And we tend to, because we don't see it very often. I imagine there's many people out there that would say, "What is the NIH? What is ERIC?" And if we don't know it's there and we can't see the tangible results of it, we tend to think that how big a deal could it really have been?
The next one is student veteran services are limited, although immediate education benefits are still being processed and paid. The main hotline phone number to answer student veterans' questions about their benefits is currently disabled. Career counseling is also limited according to the guide released by the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. One Ball State University student has been furloughed because he is also the member of the Indiana National Guard, the Ball State Daily News reports. So it's just a situation, those 5 areas which people probably would have thought, this has changed. This is what's happening with the government shutdown. It's happening, and things are going to be worse, not better at one point in time. I predict, and Jarrett doesn't want to hear this, that we're going to be going into 2014 with a government shutdown.
Well, I do want to hear that. Your predictions have been very wrong recently, so I actually want to hear you make that prediction.
So who do you think is going to cave first?
I don't know, and I think and this isn't the topic for this show and this venue, but the answer that needs to be discussed is, why is the government? What is the real reason for the government shutdown? We have all the talking points, but what is the real reason? I think we're all pretty clear on what we see as the real reason. Some people are going to be on the side of yes, we don't want this, and the shutdown needs to be done. Other people are going to be on the opposite end of that. But I'm going to respect their beliefs. I have mine, but I'm going to respect those beliefs. I'm going to believe. Again, this is my own personality, my own character attributes I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to believe that both sides of this have their principled values, and that if we take that approach, I think a compromise can be made. If we can see both sides of having their values, not inflexibility, but having their values. Yes. When we truly believe in what we're standing for, I think we have an opportunity to find a middle ground. I'm going to go in like that. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but let's go back again. We touched earlier on the show about our vulnerable population. We spoke of children. There's really not much they offer politicians. Right. Veterans offer politicians significant challenges. They're adults. They can vote. They hold jobs. They're serving their country. They've served their country. They expect the benefits that they were promised. And But here again, we see so many veterans who are vulnerable that have served overseas. They've served their country, and they're dealing with the effects of years of combat service, of combat support services. Those are the ones that are going to get lost in this government shutdown. Perhaps not the veterans who are adjusted and have made it through the challenging circumstances. And people who have listened to our show and watched our show know that resiliency is not inborn for us. I mean, it's cultivated, and we build resiliency in a lifelong process. So that explains why some people recover from traumatic events and move on, and why other people don't, or at least seemingly don't right now. So government, the Veterans Administration is going to affect a vulnerable population of the men and women who have served this country. And again, I come from a family of people that have served their country, and the latest one was my brother. So, we have promised veterans we had many expectations of them while they served, and we promised them things that they should be able to get. And I don't think that our government should be breaking their promises to especially those people that have served the country.
I mean, that's so true. And now we've gone through about 3 segments. We're almost finishing up. And the 4th segment is what is not shut down. We are naysayers saying there's a lot of problems occurring with it, and I'll summarize those in the 4th segment of people being hurt, especially all the people furloughed over at the U.S. Department of Education. But what is not being shut down is going to be a huge surprise to you. We talked about the most vulnerable, but they chose things in education for the government shutdown that, trust me, should have been shut down first. The first thing I'm pulling the plug on, and we'll talk about this in the next segment as a teaser, is stuff I don't like, and it's teaching the test. And what we're saying, the U.S. Department of Education shut down. But Mr. Secretary Arnie Duncan, are you getting a paycheck right now? Yes. Are you still working? Do you have a secretary writing down your information? Are you able to fly from one town to the next town? Yes. But the 95% of your staff is out of work. I have a problem with that. When we get back, more Jarrett and myself, Neil Haley. You're watching Total Education with Neil, and we'll be back in just a moment.
I did have the opportunity to know Judge Wida on the professional side. I was a public defender in Allegheny County and was called to serve in his courtroom many times. I bring that up for a point, because whether you were in his courtroom, a prosecutor or a defense attorney, we always knew that we were going to have a fair and just hearing with a decision that you may, depending on your side, not have agreed with or hoped for, but was sound and something that really you couldn't argue with. And I say that it sounds simple, but again, from a public defender, his work made a difference. He helped our community, and he'll be sorely missed. I hope that you'll join with us on this resolution.
We're back to Total Education with Neil, and we're with Jarrett, and so far we talked about the problems with the government shutdown, the issues, the things affected. I'm going to call out Jason, the public school guy, right now, that I was assuming, and luckily we have been able to uncover things, And it's taken me forever to uncover these things because Jason said it was basically the end of the world. Jarrett, would you agree? Well, and people can listen to the Total Education Hour this Friday or the repeat on Thursday at 9 a.m., especially because this television show will be launching next week. He painted a different picture, didn't he?
Well, and
he painted everything that was government funding as shut down,
right?
When that's not the case.
And as we talked about, that's why we have researched this. We've tried to be as accurate as possible. We want to be accurate. We want to provide information that can mobilize people and most importantly, give them answers, give them solutions, give them strategies. I just wish you would be a little bit more passionate about this.
I'm very passionate. So let's talk about first, because I am your source in education all over the world. If you want to know anything that's going on in education, don't read those boring blogs. Just come to me. I'll filter out those issues. But let's go right to what is not shut down, but could be shut down in 6 months. First of all, but let's go again, rehearsing or going through research has been cut. NIH, which we talked about, the federal school lunch program, if it continues, will be cut. A lot of the programs involving funding for libraries and research and just a lot of certain situations that are cut. We're seeing the people who are furloughed, the 95% of the people over at the United States Department of Education, that is gone. And so I'm just trying to go through and look at other things that we're seeing out there. One of the other glaring issues, what else would you say that I did not cover of the things that
we've talked about
the military academies,
and we've talked about Title I, those programs that are directly funded through the federal government. That includes the teachers, the resources.
But that's how many months for the money's out?
Well, I mean, it's almost certainly funded for the entire school year.
But if we go to 2014, it's going to be a different story.
Absolutely.
Because then you're going to look at, well, what about the funding the next school year?
Well, and schools are going to have to anticipate this. They are going to, theoretically, I could see a school considering eliminating positions for maybe a year until they can balance that budget that they're looking at. I mean, school districts are going to have, administrators are going to have incredibly difficult decisions to make, again, because some of these districts receive upwards of 20% of their money, of their income, through the federal government in all kinds of various forms. We did overlook one incredibly important program that has been disrupted, and that's the Pell Grant. Again, Pell Grants are not issued for an entire year. They're issued for a semester. My wife, and again, we can all bring anecdotal information to the table, to the discussion, but my wife grew up in a single raised by a single parent, and 3 decades ago when it was not as common as it is today. She went to school growing up in tremendous poverty. She went to school one way, and that was through a Pell Grant. That's how she graduated from the University of Pittsburgh. So
that funding is
Pell Grants will be disrupted.
When is that going to happen?
Probably the next term that they are to get the student is to get their money to pay for their school. Now, when my wife went to school, a Pell Grant could pay for almost your entire education for a term. It doesn't even come close now. But again, talk to any college student. You take $2,000, $2,500 out of their pocket to pay their tuition. It has to come somewhere else, or they're not going to be able to go to school. So I can bring anecdotal evidence that the Pell Grant made a difference. My wife would not have gone to college and would have not have graduated from college and become a productive member of society without the Pell Grant. And that's something that I really wanted to bring up before we moved on.
The two political sides, Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, probably 4 different parts, so many different areas. But think about this. Jason, the public school guy, leftist. He's going to love me about that one if he gets to see that. Leftist union guy, school teacher. He kind of painted a picture. Everything is done. We're going to look at special education, IDEA. That's going to be a problem. Title I's right now going to be in trouble. All these things. He said that the race to the top would be defunded. He said, I mean, he really went over the top, and I'm like searching articles saying, well, here are the things really that are not in trouble right now, but could be. IDEA funding special education students. Special education funding, if it goes to another school year, this government shutdown, which I guess the chances of the Steelers winning the Super Bowl are better than that happening, unless we have terrorists in our government right now, which certain Democrats would say we do. That will be discontinued, but not yet. Title I, again, we got to go to 2014. There's a lot of money still left over for Title I. No worries there. Things I wish were shut down, race to the top. They still are taking applications. So who cares about the NIH?
Well,
and then we care about one of the worst systems in the world, race to the top. I don't care if certain school districts are getting money. Let's go ahead and fund kids with cancer, fund your son's research, fund autism research from NIH. This is where our government has things. Okay, we're going to close it down, but only certain things are going to be hurt. What would you rank? What would be more important, NIH or race to the top?
Certainly, we know that the NIH funding is absolutely the answer that we're looking for. Again, though, as we've talked to our audience about this, is these programs were, again, forward funded. Will they always have funding if the government shutdown isn't resolved? No, that eventually those programs will be out of their funding sources too, and perhaps they should be. But that's, I think that's an argument for other shows. But you're right. There seems to be a very kind of complex, almost hypocritical component to this whole government shutdown.
Yes.
We talked about the administrators who are still being paid. And we know that Secretary Arne Duncan makes his money, but we know he works. We know he's out there, and but our politicians continue to get paid.
Exactly.
That to me is the most distressing
it's already hurting
issue.
The economy. You have 95% of people in that area that work for the U.S. Department of Education being furloughed. They're not receiving checks right now.
Yeah, this goes beyond inconvenience. At the beginning of the whole shutdown, that there were the comedians, there were the joke tellers who were saying, "Oh, well, you can't visit the national."
Yeah, they really did well in school.
Yeah, right. You can't visit the national park. For instance, I know that people that were vacationing or camping there, they had 2 days to leave after the government shutdown occurred, and that there were plenty of jokes about 2 days to leave and how hard is it to pack a trailer or
Mount Union. They shut it down and it's not even run by the government.
Yeah, we hear those funny stories too. Of, well, maybe we should close too. But so we've heard those components and we've heard those stories, and I think initially the reaction was, well, this is really just an inconvenience. Is it serious? Well, maybe not. It's just expecting to be able to go to the grocery store and finding out that they actually close on Thanksgiving. What an inconvenience. But now I think because of the information, I know the information that we presented, I know that our audience is seeing this as much more than an inconvenience.
Exactly. Let's look at the other one. We said race to the top. IDEA is still being funded. I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't mean IDEA. I'm going to get in trouble. No Child Left Behind is still being funded. They're still doing the waivers. They're still taking care of things. But I think it would be funny if we were doing a live show right now. Let me call the U.S. Department of Education and get them on the line. That would be fun. That would be a great radio show. Maybe I should don't do that and tape it and start calling the U.S. Department of Education and do a segment. I'm going to do that today.
Or see if they would answer questions about race to the top because there's funding for that, and not answer questions related to Title I because that funding has been disrupted.
It's disrupted, but they still have a little bit of a back coffer, but that's a great point. Another thing that is Common Core standards. We had some article saying Michigan you can't access the website. These are things I might do as a joke segment today because I have a studio and I can just do whatever I want to. And maybe, I don't know, I might get in trouble if I make phone calls and start getting people on the radio. I don't know if that's allowed. That's probably, what's up with the Federal Trade Commission on this?
Yeah, I think we probably want to check with our legal team before we really did that. 'Cause I do think when you have anyone on the phone, they're supposed to know whether other people are
unless I say, hey, this is Neil, they'll hang up on me.
That's a possibility.
I should just do some research, some groundbreaking research. But the fact is, all these things are not being disrupted. Some of the stuff, good. Special education funding, excellent. Certain autism funding, still around. We are still seeing the certain things not shut down. But some of these things, come on now, the funding that we're still seeing for the U.S. Department of Education and all this money back paid, they should say, hey, you can't spend it.
Well, certainly it doesn't seem to make sense. When you have our leadership that is continuing to receive their paycheck, we should be looking at it and say, where's the priority to settle? When we have a labor negotiation, the striking workers are not getting paid.
Right.
The company that is shut down because of the strike, they're not
Exactly.
bringing in a revenue. There's an incentive to work out a compromise. I'm not sure that our elected leaders,
they don't want to compromise.
Right. And I don't really think they see the incentive for it. Maybe if they weren't getting their $600 a day as their paycheck, which when I read that, I was just stunned that I knew that a congressman made a decent, a good income, but boy, $600 a day, I was really, stunned by that. Maybe if we started not giving our leaders that money, they would be willing to go to the table. I know we can't do that. There's a whole constitutional component to that, but you can't deny, no one can deny the hypocritical nature of that, and the fact that they receive their pay when they're denying so many other people of their livelihood, and they're denying, again, our most vulnerable citizens of the programs that matter. And that's why we've been addressing this on so many of our shows.
Yes.
We want the politicians to answer that question. We want them to be accountable to that.
There's a lot of people hurting, and the thing goes back to the shout out St. Agnes, and I did this where I would create a certain situation when that school's no longer in existence, but my students, we would work on having, again, a Congress, House, Senate, and we would go through the process of going ahead and coming up with a bill, and then they would vote it, and it would vote down, and we get passed, and the passion involved. And hopefully my students out there really learned a lot from this. Well, our politicians today can't do that. And see, I'm not going to make the blame and say, it's the Democrats, it's President Obama, or it's the Tea Party. The fact of the matter is, we are looking like fools internationally. We're looking like fools, and we're about to cause, and this is again history, and that's education in my opinion, causing us to the second recession. It's out of our control. It's completely out of our hands. And we have to say goodbye at that point in time because the people are saying, this is not
Perhaps
education.
we should leave on a more positive note, though.
No, why positive? That's Jarrett. Again, go to TotalTutor.net. Check out more information on Jarrett and I. Twitter, Total Tutor, Neil S. Haley, Facebook. And if you want to tweet out Jason the Public School Guy about his crazy leftist, you can find Jason the Public School Guy on Twitter as well. I hope everyone has a great rest of the month. Next month, sequestration, but who knows what I'll be thinking about. Take care, and we'll talk next month.